A young millionaire cries upon receiving the news of his son's death, but a beggar girl appears and says, "He's still alive. I can prove it," leaving everyone speechless. Ethan Carter's phone vibrated on the oak desk in his office on the 42nd floor of the Carter Grand Hotel. He glanced at the screen distractedly while wrapping up the details of an expansion contract that would double his already impressive hotel chain. Unknown number. Normally, he would ignore it, but something, maybe that parental sixth sense, made him pick up. "Mr. Carter?" The male voice on the other end sounded formal, carrying a tone he immediately recognized as the bearer of bad news. "Yes, this is he." Ethan loosened his tie, feeling a sudden tightness in his chest. "This is Officer Bennett from the City Police Department." A short pause, the kind that precedes difficult information. "Sir, I'm deeply sorry to inform you there's been an accident involving your son, Jacob." Time stopped. The wide, luxurious office suddenly felt as though it were closing in around him. The words that followed arrived in slow motion, each one hitting harder than the last. Her serious accident at the club's pool. The paramedics tried to resuscitate him for almost an hour. Did everything they could. He didn't make it. Ethan couldn't respond. The phone slipped from his trembling hand, hitting the desk and then the carpet. His vision blurred. A strange, distant sound reached his ears. His own sobbing, he realized after a few seconds. "Sir, Mr. Carter, can you hear me?" He retrieved the phone with numb fingers, reality still feeling far away, as if he were watching someone else's life. Where is he now?" The voice that came out was unrecognizable. Broken. "He's at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm sorry, sir." Ethan hung up without saying another word. He remained still, eyes fixed on the glass wall overlooking the city below. Tears now fell freely. Jacob had gone to the club with the nanny, Lisa. It was Tuesday, swim day, as it had been every Tuesday for the past 6 months. He'd spoken with him that morning over breakfast. Jacob had been excited about the lesson. He wanted to show the instructor he could dive without fear. "Dad, I'm going to swim like a dolphin today," he'd said, with that big smile missing a front tooth. "This can't be," Ethan murmured, running his hands over his wet face. "This can't be happening." The intercom rang, startling him. "Mr. Carter, your driver is ready as requested," his secretary informed him. Completely unaware of the tragedy that had just occurred, he didn't even remember asking for the car. Maybe he'd pressed the button automatically. Maybe it hadn't been him at all. Nothing made sense anymore. East St. Mary's Hospital was a modern complex on the east side of the city. Ethan walked through its automatic doors like a sleepwalker, eyes red, face etched with tears he couldn't hold back. "My son," he told the receptionist, voice trembling. "Jacob Carter. I got a call about an accident." The woman's compassionate look was answer enough. She made a few quick calls, and soon a middle-aged doctor with graying hair and a serious expression came to meet him. "Mr. Carter, I'm Dr. Mercer. I'm so sorry about your son." Ethan nodded mechanically. The doctor guided him through white corridors lit by cold, bright lights. His words reached Ethan's confused mind in fragments. "Cardiorespiratory arrest, drowning, prolonged attempts at resuscitation, no response. We did everything we could." "How did this happen?" Ethan managed to ask, his voice almost a whisper. "He was in a swimming lesson with a professional instructor." The doctor sighed. "From what we know, there was a moment when the instructor had to help another child. It happened in a matter of minutes. By the time they noticed, Jacob was already at the bottom of the pool." Ethan closed his eyes tightly, the horror of the scene forming in his mind. His little Jacob, scared, alone, struggling underwater. Guilt hit him hard. Why wasn't he there? Why did he always put work first? "You need to identify the body," said the doctor, stopping in front of a grey door with a small glass window. "Are you ready?" What a ridiculous question. How could anyone be ready to identify their child's body? But Ethan nodded. His body moved on pure instinct. The room was small and cold, with white tile walls that intensified the harsh, impersonal lighting. A gurney covered by a sheet occupied the center of the space. The cold air smelled of hospital disinfectant, an odor that would forever be etched in his memory, linked to this moment. The doctor approached the gurney, looked at Ethan as if seeking final permission, and gently pulled back the sheet. Jacob's face appeared, pale and serene. He looked as though he were just sleeping, his brown hair still damp, the freckles across his nose inherited from his mother, his lips now colorless. It was his son, and yet it wasn't. The energy, the life, the mischievous grin, gone. Ethan's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees on the cold floor, a wrenching sob bursting from his throat. The tears returned with full force, blurring his vision. He reached out to touch his son's face but stopped halfway, afraid that the touch would confirm the reality of this nightmare. "Jacob," he whispered, voice choked. "Please, son, please don't leave me." The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Carter. We did everything we could." Ethan didn't reply. He had no words. His world had collapsed. 5 years ago, when Jacob was born on a rainy September night, his life had gained a purpose it never had before. The hotels, the money, the recognition, they all meant nothing compared to his son's smile, his laughter, the touch of his small hands. "I need a moment," he managed to say between sobs. The doctor nodded and left the room silently, giving father and son a final moment of privacy. Ethan moved closer to the gurney, finally touching his son's face with trembling fingers. The skin was cold, so cold. "I'm sorry," he murmured, tears falling onto the white sheet. "I should have been there. I should have protected you. It was my job to protect you." He ran his fingers through Jacob's damp hair, remembering how many times he did that to help him fall asleep. How many stories had he left untold because he was too busy? How many games had he missed? How many broken promises of "next time I'll be there"? How long he stayed there, crying over his son's body, Ethan couldn't say. Time had lost all meaning. It was the insistent buzzing of his phone that brought him back to reality. He looked at the screen. Lisa, the nanny. "Mr. Carter," she said through desperate sobs. "I only took my eyes off him for 1 minute. I swear to God. He was with the instructor and... Her voice was a mix of hysteria and guilt. Ethan didn't have the strength to comfort or blame her. He hung up without responding. He needed to leave. The air was becoming too heavy, suffocating. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Ethan walked aimlessly, shuffling steps, his gaze lost in emptiness. People stared at him with that particular pity reserved for those recognizing absolute pain. Some looked away, embarrassed by witnessing something as intimate as a man grieving for his child. He didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. He needed to process what had happened. If he could ever manage to, without realizing it, he ended up at an emergency exit door. He pushed it open and found himself in a side alley of the hospital. The sky was beginning to darken, twilight painting clouds in intense orange and purple, colors far too bright for such a dark day. The night air was cold, but he hardly felt it. He leaned against the brick wall and slid down to the ground, legs too weak to support him. Hugging his knees like a child, he let himself cry again, not caring if anyone saw him in that state. The mighty Ethan Carter, the man who built a hotel empire from scratch, now destroyed, broken, defeated by the only battle that ever truly mattered. That was when he realized he wasn't alone in the alley. A small figure emerged quietly from the shadows. A girl, not much older than Jacob, maybe 5 years old. Dark, disheveled hair, worn and dirty clothes, big, watchful eyes that seemed far older than her body. "Mister," she said softly, almost a whisper. Ethan tried to wipe his tears, surprised to see a child alone at that hour. "You shouldn't be here, little one. It's dangerous." "Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer his question. She glanced back toward the street as if checking if anyone was following her, then stepped a little closer. "He's still alive," she said so quietly that Ethan barely heard. "I saw who took him." The words hit Ethan like an electric shock. He stood, staring at the girl, trying to understand if he'd heard correctly. What are you talking about?" "Your son," she answered, her gaze fixed on his, not blinking. "The boy from the pool. He didn't die. I saw them take him." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Was this some cruel joke? Or was the child confused? Maybe she was just a homeless kid seeking attention, making up stories. But how did she know about Jacob? I saw it, she went on, even more quietly, as if sharing a dangerous secret. I was at the club. They let me in through the back sometimes when Joe, the security guard, is on duty. He gives me food from the cafeteria. She paused, checking the street again. I saw your son in the pool. I saw when he got out coughing. Then a man in a suit took him. I thought it was you, but it wasn't. A man in a suit. Ethan now gripped the girl's shoulders more firmly than he intended, adrenaline coursing through his veins. What did he look like? What exactly did you see? A tall man, grey hair on the sides. He wore a big, shiny watch. He put your son into a big black car before the ambulance even got there. She paused. The boy was wearing blue swim trunks with yellow stars. Ethan's heart pounded. That was exactly the swim outfit Jacob loved to wear at every lesson. How could this girl know that detail? What's your name? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his whole body trembled. Lily. She looked over her shoulder again, nervous. I have to go now. I just wanted you to know he's not dead. She tried to pull away, but Ethan held her arm, perhaps too tightly. The hope, however fragile, was like a fire being rekindled. Wait, you have to tell me everything you saw. You need to talk to the police. Lily shook her head vigorously, fear evident in her eyes. I can't talk to cops. They'll send me back to the shelter. Or worse, they'll make me live with the Wilkins again. A tremor ran through her small body. Lily, please. Ethan's voice broke. He's my son, my only son. Something in his desperation seemed to convince the girl. She stopped trying to flee and looked at him, assessing him with a wisdom beyond her years. I saw the car's license plate, she said quietly. I wrote it down because it was weird. I always write down weird things. She reached into the torn pocket of her faded jacket and pulled out a crumpled, dirty piece of paper. Ethan took it with trembling hands. A license plate number Suarez written in childish scrawl. In the corner of the paper, there was a simple drawing of a watch. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam? He asked, hope battling skepticism. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried to exploit him for his fortune. The boy has a small scar behind his right ear, Lily said without hesitation. It looks like a little lightning bolt, like Harry Potter's. Ethan's blood ran cold. Jacob really did have that scar, the result of a fall when he was 3. It was small, hidden by his hair, something they used to joke about, calling it a sign he was special, like his favorite book character. It wasn't something anyone would know. It wasn't visible unless you were very close. How do you know that? Ethan's voice was almost a whisper now. He was at the edge of the pool when I came in. He was adjusting his swim cap, complaining it hurt his scar. He took the cap off for a second, and I saw the mark when one of the instructors asked what it was. Ethan felt a sudden dizziness and had to lean against the wall. The possibility that the girl was telling the truth, that Jacob might be alive, was so overwhelming he could hardly breathe. But if Jacob was alive, then who was lying on that gurney in the morgue? And why would anyone set up something so elaborate, so cruel? I need your help, Lily, he said, kneeling to be at her eye level. If what you're saying is true, my son is in danger. Someone took him. Someone wants me to believe he's dead. Lily nodded solemnly. I know where the car went. I followed it a few blocks before I lost sight of it. It was heading east on the main avenue. A new determination was born within Ethan, replacing the paralyzing despair. If there was even the slightest chance Jacob was alive, he would turn the world upside down to find him. Let's go, he said, extending his hand to Lily. I want you to show me everything, and tell me exactly what you saw. The girl hesitated for a moment, looking at his outstretched hand as if it were a trap. Then, slowly, she placed her small hand in his. As they left the hospital behind, Ethan couldn't help looking back at the building where he'd thought he'd lost everything. If Jacob wasn't dead, who was that in the cold morgue? And why would anyone go to such elaborate lengths? The certainty that something very wrong was happening grew inside him. Someone had carefully planned this, someone who knew his life, his habits, someone with access to privileged information, someone who wanted to destroy him. And that someone had made a serious mistake by leaving a witness behind, a small witness named Lily. Ethan sat in the armchair in Jacob's bedroom, holding his son's favorite teddy bear between his hands. This was the third night since the supposed accident. 3 days of an emotional roller coaster that left him exhausted and confused. There were moments when hope took over completely. Lily's information seemed so specific, so detailed. The scar behind the ear, the swim trunks, details about the club. How would a homeless girl know all that if she hadn't actually seen what happened? But then, in the darkest hours of the night, doubt crept in. What if he was clinging to a fantasy to avoid facing the devastating reality? What if his desperation was so great that he believed anything that negated Jacob's death? "So I'm going crazy," he murmured to the empty room, running a hand through his disheveled hair. His eyes burned with fatigue. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since it all happened. He got up and walked over to the shelf full of toys and books. He picked up a framed photo of Jacob at the park, smiling with a chocolate ice cream dripping down his fingers. His chest tightened. "Where are you, son?" he whispered, touching the glass of the frame. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Kevin, his lawyer and college friend. "Ethan, we need to talk," Kevin said bluntly. "I have information about the body." "What did you find out?" Ethan felt his heart race. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the office in an hour." The call ended abruptly, leaving Ethan even more anxious. He looked again at Jacob's room, at the neatly organized toys that hadn't been touched in days. The nanny, Lisa, had quit the day after the accident, devastated by guilt. Guilt or something else. The doubt suddenly arose in his mind. Lisa had worked for him for only 8 months. She had impeccable references and was attentive to Jacob, but her sudden departure, by phone, without even returning to collect her belongings, now it seemed suspicious. He picked up his phone again and dialed Lisa's number. Voicemail. He tried 2 more times with the same result. A chill ran down his spine. The law firm was located downtown in a renovated historic building. Kevin awaited him in a private conference room, his face tense and worried. "You look terrible," Kevin said, indicating the chair in front of him. "I haven't slept," Ethan replied, sitting down. "What did you find?" Kevin hesitated, looking at the closed folder on the table. "I got a friend of mine, a medical examiner, to take an unofficial look at the records for the body identified as Jacob." He paused. "Ethan, there are inconsistencies." Ethan felt the blood pulsing at his temples. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "For starters, the medical report indicates drowning, but the examiner noticed that some typical signs of drowning were absent, and there's something else." Kevin opened the folder and slid a sheet of paper across the table. "The fingerprints." "What?" Ethan picked up the paper, but the technical terms and codes didn't make sense to him. "When a child is born, the hospital collects their footprints and fingerprints. It's standard procedure." Kevin pointed to the document. "My friend compared the prints from the body to those from Jacob's birth records. They don't match, Ethan." A heavy silence fell between them. "So who's in the morgue?" Ethan's voice came out strangled. "We don't know." "A child who looked similar, the same age, same physical build." Ethan stood up, unable to remain seated. The confirmation that Jacob might be alive filled him with almost painful hope. "What does the police say about this?" Kevin grimaced. "That's the problem. I spoke to Detective Monroe, who's officially assigned to the case. He refused to reopen the investigation. Said it was common to have minor discrepancies in children's prints, and that I was just feeding you false hope." "That makes no sense. If there's any doubt—" "Exactly," Kevin interrupted. "It makes no sense. Unless he's involved," Ethan realized, the weight of it hitting him. "Or someone above him is." Kevin nodded slowly. "We have to be careful, Ethan. If we're right, if Jacob was actually kidnapped and someone staged his death, we're dealing with something bigger than we imagined." Ethan sat down again, his mind racing with possibilities. "The girl, Lily, mentioned a tall man in a suit with grey hair. Does that remind you of anyone?" Kevin thought for a moment. "It could be anyone. But it makes me wonder, who would have a motive to do this to you?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds before Kevin continued. Ethan, your hotel chain has expanded rapidly over the last 5 years. You've stepped on some toes. Competitors who lost deals, ex-partners who felt betrayed, fired employees. This is insane. Ethan shook his head. We're talking about business, not organized crime. Sometimes the line is thinner than we'd like, Kevin said grimly. Remember the Henderson case, the piece of land where you built the Carter Seaside Resort? Ethan frowned. What about it? Henderson was furious when you won that bid. He was convinced that land would be his. Made threats, remember? They were just the words of a frustrated man, Ethan dismissed, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Besides, Henderson doesn't have grey hair. He's practically bald. He could have hired someone. Ethan got up again, restless. And Lisa? The nanny? She vanished. Won't take my calls. It's suspicious, Kevin agreed. I'll have a private investigator look into her, quietly. Ethan walked to the window, gazing at the city below, thinking of Jacob somewhere out there, scared and away from home. I want to talk to Lily again, he said decisively. I need to know more about what she saw. And finding Lily wasn't easy. The girl had no fixed address, moving between shelters and the streets. Ethan spent the rest of the day searching the area around the hospital, asking about her. A flower vendor on the corner finally helped. Little Lily, dark hair, big eyes. She usually hangs around the main square when the weather's good. Ethan followed the tip and found Lily sitting on a stone bench, watching pigeons. She seemed apprehensive when she saw him, but she didn't run. Hi, Lily, he said, approaching slowly so as not to scare her. Remember me, she nodded. You're the father of the boy from the pool. Ethan sat next to her, keeping a respectful distance. I need your help again. Can you tell me more about what you saw that day? Lily looked around, as if checking for eavesdroppers. I already told you everything. Please try to remember more details. Anything might help. Did you see the man who took Jacob clearly? Lily hesitated. Not really. I was far away, but what? He talked to someone before. A woman. They argued. Ethan's heart sped up. A woman? What did she look like? Pretty. Long, brown hair. She was wearing workout clothes. That description could fit anyone, including dozens of people who frequent the club. But a suspicion began to form. Lily, was that woman with Jacob before? Was she accompanying him? The girl thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, she was with him before the lesson. I saw them talking. Lisa. It had to be Lisa. Did you hear them arguing? What were they saying? Couldn't hear everything, they were far, but she seemed nervous. I heard her say something like, this wasn't the deal. This wasn't the deal. The words echoed in Ethan's mind. A conspiracy, then Lisa was involved. After the man put the boy in the car, did she leave too? Lily shook her head. No, she stayed, started screaming and calling for help. She acted like she'd just realized the boy was gone. A performance. Lisa had been part of the plan, and then faked distress to avoid suspicion. Anger began to boil in Ethan. Thank you, Lily. You've been a huge help. He hesitated, noticing her worn clothes, her tattered shoes. Do you have somewhere to stay? Are you safe? She shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. I get by. Ethan took out his wallet and offered her some bills. Take this, for food and a safe place to sleep. Lily eyed the money warily but eventually accepted. Thanks. If you remember anything else or if you need help, call me. Ethan wrote his number on a card. Any time. Back in his empty apartment, Ethan felt his head spin with all the new information. The fingerprint confirmation, Lisa's involvement, the description of the mysterious man, pieces of a puzzle that were starting to fit together but still formed an incomplete picture. He sat in his office and picked up a notepad. He needed to organize his thoughts, list potential culprits and motives. Henderson, he wrote, thinking of the businessman who lost the seaside bid. A vindictive man with resources. But would he be capable of kidnapping a child? Lisa, he wrote next, the apparently trustworthy nanny who vanished after the incident. Who had recruited her? How much did they pay her? His eyes fell upon a framed photo on his desk, him and his former partner, Richard Delaney, at the grand opening of their first hotel 5 years ago. Richard had left the partnership on bad terms, claiming Ethan had betrayed him in negotiations. Richard, he added to the list, feeling a chill. Richard had grey hair at the temples. Richard knew Jacob. Richard knew about the scar. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was an unknown number. "Ethan Carter," he answered, tense. "Mr. Carter." The female voice on the other side was hesitant. "This is Lisa Jenkins." Ethan felt his blood go cold. "Lisa, I was just thinking about you." A brief silence. "Mr. Carter, I need to talk to you, in person." "Interesting. I've been trying to call you for days." "I know, I'm sorry." She sounded nervous. "I was scared. I still am. But I need to tell you something about Jacob." Ethan's heart leaped. "You know where he is?" "Not exactly, but I have information. Please, can we meet? Somewhere public." Ethan's instinct told him it could be a trap. But if Lisa really knew something about Jacob, the cafe at Palmer Bookstore, tomorrow at 10 a.m. "It's busy, has security cameras." "I'll be there," she said, and hung up. Ethan stared at the phone, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. Should he call Kevin? The police? No, the police might be involved. What if they were monitoring his calls? He wondered, not for the first time, if he was going insane. Paranoia. Conspiracy. This didn't happen in real life, did it? Ordinary people didn't fake deaths and kidnap children. But then he remembered what Kevin had said about the fingerprints. It wasn't Jacob in the morgue. It was another child. Scientific confirmation that someone was playing a cruel game. He looked at a photo of Jacob on his desk, his son smiling on a picnic day. "I'm going to find you," he promised aloud. "No matter who's behind this, I'll bring you back." The thought of Jacob alone, scared, away from home, was unbearable. If he was still alive, and now Ethan was almost certain he was, then there was hope. That was all that mattered. Yet a small voice in the back of his mind kept asking, what if this was just a defense mechanism? What if he was clinging to an illusion, unable to accept his son's death? Ethan looked at the list of names he'd written. Henderson, Lisa, Richard. Real people with possible motives. Lily, with her specific, detailed account. The mismatched fingerprints. No, it wasn't delusion. Something real was happening. A conspiracy centered on his son, on his suffering. He picked up Jacob's teddy bear again, feeling the familiar texture of the toy his son had hugged so many times. "Hang in there, Jacob," he whispered. "Dad is coming." The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe half an hour early. He chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and the emergency exits. He felt like a spy movie character, analyzing every person who walked in, assessing potential threats. By 10:15, Lisa still hadn't shown up. By 10:30, Ethan began to suspect she wasn't coming. By 10:45, his phone rang. "Mr. Carter." It was her, voice shaky. "I can't go in. They're watching me." "Lisa? Who's watching you? Where are you? They said they'll kill me if I talk to you." She was crying now. "And they'll hurt Jacob." "So he is alive," Ethan said, adrenaline rushing through his veins. "Lisa, please, tell me where you are. I can help you. I can protect both of you." "No, you don't understand. They're powerful. They have people everywhere." A pause. "I'm so sorry for what I did. They paid me, but I didn't know they'd take Jacob. I thought it was just to scare you so you'd pay." "Pay what? Who are they, Lisa?" A noise on the other end. Lisa gasped. "I have to go. They're coming. Lisa, wait." But the line had gone dead. Ethan tried calling back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. His heart pounded. Jacob was alive. Lisa had confirmed it, and now she was in danger too. Whoever was behind this had enough power and reach to terrify Lisa into silence. It wasn't just about money then. It was more personal, deeper. Something to do with his past, the business he'd built, the decisions he'd made. As he walked back to his car, Ethan realized he was being watched. A man in a dark sedan, parked across the street, was openly staring at him. When their eyes met, the man smiled. A cold, calculating smile, then started the engine and slowly drove away. A warning. Ethan was sure of the conspiracy, and now the conspirators wanted him to know they were watching. The game was getting more dangerous, and Jacob was at the center of it. The list of names grew on Ethan's desk. Each person represented a connection to his past, a potential enemy, someone who might have the motive to orchestrate Jacob's kidnapping. His eyes burned after spending the whole night reviewing old files, contracts, and emails, searching for any clue that might reveal who was behind his son's disappearance. Richard Delaney topped the list. His former partner had left the company after a fierce battle over participation rights. Richard claimed Ethan had tricked him by changing clauses at the last minute. The legal fight lasted 2 years and ended with Richard ruined and vowing revenge. Next was Martin Henderson, the businessman who'd lost the bid for the coastal land to the Carter Seaside Resort, one of the most profitable properties in Ethan's chain. The threats Henderson had made at the time had seemed like empty words, but now they carried different weight in Ethan's mind. The third name surprised him when he wrote it: Christine, his ex-wife. The divorce had been civil on the surface, but bitter underneath. She got a substantial share of his assets, but she'd never hidden her resentment that Ethan prioritized work over family. Would she go so far as to use their own child as a tool for revenge? Ethan shook his head, trying to dismiss the idea. Christine loved Jacob, despite the problems between them. Still, he left her name on the list. At this point, he couldn't rule out anyone. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Kevin. "I have news about Lisa," the lawyer said without preamble. "My investigator found her." Ethan's heart raced. "Where?" "At a roadside motel on the outskirts of the city. She was using a fake name, paying in cash. She looked scared, like she was running from someone." "Did she say anything?" "No chance. When my guy came back with backup to approach her, the room was empty. But she left something behind." Kevin paused. "A flash drive. I'm sending you the contents now." Ethan opened the email as soon as it arrived. There was only one video file. His hand shook as he clicked play. Lisa appeared on screen, her face pale and haggard, deep circles under her eyes. "Mr. Carter, by the time you see this, I'll probably be gone. Or dead." She swallowed nervously. "I made a terrible mistake. They approached me 6 months ago, right when I started working for you. Offered me money to give them information about your routine, about Jacob. I had no idea what they were planning, I swear." Lisa glanced at something off camera, as if afraid of being interrupted. "On the day of the accident, I was supposed to take Jacob to his swimming lesson and leave for 15 minutes, leaving him with the instructor. They said they just wanted to scare him. Stage something so you'd pay a ransom. But when I came back and saw the confusion, the ambulance, I realized the plan was much worse." She sobbed, wiping her face. "Jacob is alive, Mr. Carter. They took him somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but I heard them mention a remote property near the mountains." Lisa leaned closer to the camera. "The man behind this uses the codename Damien. I never saw his face. He always used intermediaries. But once I heard them say you two knew each other from the past." The video ended abruptly. Ethan stared at the blank screen, mind processing the new information. Damien. The name meant nothing to him. He didn't know anyone with that name. Was it an alias? He looked again at his list of suspects. Richard as Henderson y Christine. None of them matched the codename Damien. He needed to expand his search, dig deeper into his past. But a few miles away, in an isolated house on the slopes of the mountains, Jacob Carter sat on a strange bed, hugging his knees. The room was actually nice. It had a big TV, video games, shelves of toys, but it wasn't his room, and he wanted to go home. It had been 5 days since the man with grey hair took him from the pool. 5 days away from his dad. Jacob had cried a lot the first days, but now sadness gave way to determination. He had to be clever, like the heroes in the books his father read to him at bedtime. The door opened and a woman entered with a tray of sandwiches and juice. She was pretty, with blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Lunchtime, Jacob," she said, placing the tray on the table. "How are you feeling today?" Jacob didn't answer. He had decided not to talk to the adults in the house. They weren't his friends, no matter how nice they pretended to be. Still mad at me? The woman sat on the edge of the bed. Look, I know you miss your dad, but it's only for a little while, I promise. You'll see him again soon. When? The word slipped out before he could stop it. The woman seemed surprised to hear his voice. Soon? Your dad is dealing with some important things first. Jacob knew it was a lie. His dad had to be looking for him. Frantic. He had overheard the adults talking when they thought he wasn't listening. They talked about making his dad believe he was dead. It made no sense. Why would they say something so cruel? I want to call my dad, he said, staring at the woman, just to tell him I'm okay. We can't do that right now, sweetheart. She adjusted the blanket on the bed. But soon, okay. Now eat your lunch. Later, we can watch a movie if you'd like. When she left, Jacob ran to the door and pressed his ear against it. He heard muffled voices in the hallway. The kid's getting restless, the woman said. Not our problem, responded a male voice. Damien wants him here until further notice. What if Carter figures it out? What if he finds this place? A dry laugh. Impossible. We have people watching his every move. If he gets too close, we switch to phase 2. I don't like phase 2, the woman whispered, and then the voices faded. Jacob went back to the bed, thinking. Phase 2? What was that? It sounded dangerous. He looked out the window. He was on the second floor, too high to jump. And even if he got out, he had no idea where he was. He only saw trees and distant mountains. But there had to be a way to send a message to his dad. There had to be. Ethan parked in front of Richard Delaney's mansion, determined to get answers. After watching Lisa's video, he decided to confront everyone on his list, starting with his ex-partner. The butler led him to the office where Richard waited, seated behind a grand dark wood desk. Ethan Carter. Richard didn't get up, merely gesturing toward the chair opposite him. Surprised to see you here. My condolences on your son. Something in the way Richard said those words, no real emotion, heightened Ethan's suspicions. Jacob isn't dead, Richard. The ex-partner raised his eyebrows. That's not what everyone's saying, and the police. They're both wrong. He was kidnapped. Ethan watched Richard carefully. By someone who wants to destroy me. And you think I have something to do with that? Richard gave a humorless smile. Please, Ethan. We had our business differences. But kidnapping a child, that's absurd. Is it? You swore I'd regret what I did. Said one day I'd know what it was like to lose everything I love. Richard leaned forward. That was a figure of speech, for God's sake. I was bankrupt, humiliated. Of course I said things I shouldn't have, he sighed. But that was years ago. I've rebuilt my life. I have new ventures, a new family. Why would I risk it all for vengeance? Ethan studied Richard's face. He seemed genuinely confused by the accusation. There was none of the nervousness or guilt Ethan expected to see. Do you know anyone who goes by the code name Damien? Richard frowned, thinking, Damien? No, can't say I do. He paused. Ethan, I think you should consider the possibility that your grief is affecting your judgment. Losing a child is devastating. Sometimes our minds create alternate scenarios to cope with the pain. I'm not delusional, Ethan said through gritted teeth. I have proof, got witnesses. What kind of proof? Ethan hesitated. Revealing too much could be dangerous. If Richard was involved, Ethan didn't want to show all his cards. Enough to know Jacob is alive, and that someone from my past orchestrated all of this. Richard shook his head, a mixture of pity and concern in his gaze. I'm sorry you're going through this, truly, but I can't help with something I didn't do. Ethan left the mansion frustrated. Richard didn't appear to be involved, or he was an excellent actor. He decided to visit his next suspect, Henderson. And the meeting with Martin Henderson was even less productive. The businessman, now significantly older and seemingly less bitter, seemed genuinely shocked by Ethan's accusations. Carter, I lost that land deal to you nearly a decade ago. It was just business. I have grandchildren now, for God's sake. You really think I'd kidnap a child? Ethan left Henderson's office with more doubts than answers. His main suspects appeared innocent. Who else had such a strong motive to make him suffer? His phone rang. It was Christine, his ex-wife. "We need to talk," she said, tension in her voice. "Come to my house, now." Christine was waiting in the living room of her elegant suburban home. Even after the divorce, she kept a luxurious lifestyle, paid for by the generous alimony Ethan provided. "You've been harassing people, Ethan?" she asked bluntly the moment he entered. "Kevin called me. He said you've been confronting old associates with absurd accusations." "They're not absurd accusations," Ethan replied, irritated. "Jacob is alive, Christine. Someone kidnapped him and made me think he was dead." Christine closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering patience. "Ethan, I know you're grieving. I am too. He was my son as well. That's exactly why you should hear me out. What if there's even the smallest chance he's alive?" "I saw the body, Ethan, at the morgue. It was him." "No, it wasn't. The fingerprints didn't match." "Kevin told me about that too. Some minimal discrepancy that could be explained by technical factors." Ethan felt his frustration rise. It was like beating his head against a wall. Why does no one believe me? Why does everyone want me to accept my son's death? Christine's eyes filled with tears. "Because we're worried about you. This obsessive behavior, these conspiracy theories, it's not healthy, Ethan." "They're not conspiracy theories. I have concrete proof." "What proof?" "The testimony of a homeless girl. A suspicious video from a nanny who disappeared." Ethan clenched his fists, trying to keep his anger in check. "How do you know about the video? Kevin told you that too." Christine looked uncomfortable for a moment. "He's worried, Ethan. We all are." "I don't need your worry. I need help finding my son." "Our son is dead, Ethan." Christine's voice trembled. "Please accept it. Start grieving. Go see a therapist." He stood up, unable to continue the conversation. "Jacob is alive, and I'll find him, with or without your help." Leaving Christine's house, Ethan found Lily waiting on the sidewalk. The girl seemed to have a knack for showing up at the hardest moments. "You didn't give up," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "No, I haven't." Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "Though it seems I'm the only one who hasn't." "I believe you," Lily said with a conviction that belied her 5 years. "I know what I saw." They walked to Ethan's car. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," he said, exasperated. "My ex-wife, my lawyer, even the police. Grown-ups don't usually believe what they don't want to see." Lily shrugged. "At the shelter, no one believed me when I said Mrs. Perkins was stealing our money. But I saw her taking the coins we earned from the Christmas shows." There was a wisdom in Lily's simple words that touched Ethan. Children often saw what adults, with their biases and expectations, could not. "Where do we go now?" Lily asked. Ethan hesitated. It wasn't right to involve a child in his dangerous investigation. On the other hand, Lily was his only real ally, the only one who had actually witnessed what happened. "First, I'll get you something to eat. Then I need to check some things at my office." On the way to the restaurant, Ethan noticed a black car following them. He tried to lose it by taking random turns, but the vehicle maintained a constant distance. "I think we're being followed," he muttered, checking the rearview mirror. Lily turned around in her seat. "Is it the same car as before?" "What car?" "The one near your ex-wife's house. Black, tinted windows." Ethan felt a chill. Lily was incredibly observant. "Not sure, maybe." They reached the restaurant, and the mysterious car vanished. During lunch, Ethan tried not to dwell on the implications of being watched, focusing on making Lily feel comfortable. She devoured a huge burger and fries as if she hadn't eaten in days, and perhaps she hadn't. "Where do you live, Lily?" Ethan asked, realizing he knew very little about her. She shrugged again, a gesture that seemed habitual. "Lots of places. Sometimes the shelter on Pine Street if they have space, sometimes with people I know. No family. My mom died when I was a baby. Never met my dad." She said it without self-pity, just stating facts. "Social services tried to place me in foster homes, but it never worked out." Ethan felt a wave of compassion for the girl, so young, yet so independent by necessity. "How did you end up at the club that day?" "I told you already. Security guard Joe lets me in sometimes. I help pick up towels, and he gives me food. That day, I was in the locker room when I heard the commotion at the pool." I went out to see what it was, and that's when I saw your son and the man in the suit." Lily's story had no apparent inconsistencies, at least none Ethan could detect, and she had nothing to gain by lying. After lunch, they headed to Ethan's office in the main hotel of his chain. In the elevator, Lily seemed impressed by the luxury around her, though she tried not to show it. "You're really rich, huh?" she asked as they ascended to the top floor. Ethan smiled. "I have enough money, but I learned the hard way that it doesn't buy what really matters." In his office, Ethan began reviewing old staff files, searching for anyone who might use the codename Damien or have connections to that name. He was particularly interested in people who had worked with him in the early days of his career, when he was laying the foundation of his hotel empire. Lily wandered around the room, curiously examining items on the desk and photos on the walls. She stopped in front of one photo in particular, Ethan at an awards ceremony, standing next to an older man. "Who's this?" she asked, pointing. "Marcus Wells. He was my mentor when I started in the hotel business. He passed away a few years ago." "And this one?" She pointed to another photo where Ethan appeared with a group of men in suits in front of a building under construction. "That's the team that worked on my first hotel. This photo's from about 15 years ago." Lily studied the image intently. "Who's the man with the sunglasses?" Ethan walked over, looking at the person she indicated. A thin man, slightly apart from the group, almost at the edge of the photo. "Daniel Morgan. He was one of the architects. Didn't last long at the company. He had a drinking problem, if I recall correctly." The girl went back to her exploration as Ethan resumed his search. After nearly an hour of poring over digital and physical files, he leaned back in his chair, exhausted and frustrated. Nothing. No reference to the name Damien. No clue as to who could be behind Jacob's kidnapping. "Try looking for people you harmed," Lily suggested from the couch, where she was flipping through a magazine. Ethan frowned. "Harmed? Yeah, you know, people who lost their jobs, money, stuff like that because of you." Ethan thought about it. In the highly competitive hotel industry, many people ended up harmed during normal processes of expansion and competition. Employees fired during restructures, small hotels that closed because they couldn't compete, minority partners whose shares were diluted. "That would be hundreds of people," he muttered, "but there must be someone you remember. Someone who got really mad." Lily's simple logic was striking. Ethan leaned back, closed his eyes, trying to recall meaningful confrontations over his career. There was the Donovan family, whose small family hotel went bankrupt when Ethan opened a luxury resort in the same region. The father had made a scene at the grand opening, shouting accusations. Or Jennifer Hayes, an executive Ethan had fired for suspected fraud, who threatened to sue him. That was when his phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, he felt his blood run cold. "If you keep going, you'll never see Jacob again." The message was accompanied by a photo of Jacob, apparently sleeping in an unfamiliar room. Ethan nearly dropped the phone. The confirmation he'd been desperate for was right there. His son was alive, but it was also a clear threat. Stop investigating or suffer the consequences. "What is it?" Lily asked, noticing his expression. Ethan showed her the message. Her eyes widened. "See? I told you he was alive. Yes, you were right all along." Ethan stared at the photo, heart racing. The image was partly dark, but he could tell Jacob was wearing pajamas he didn't recognize. At least he seemed physically okay. He tried to trace the origin of the text, but it was a disposable number, impossible to track. "They don't want you to keep looking," Lily observed. "That means you're getting close." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, but close to what? I've gone through my entire past and haven't found anyone who fits." "Maybe you're not looking at the right person," Lily suggested. "Or maybe you're looking at them, but not really seeing them." Her enigmatic words echoed in his mind as Ethan stared at Jacob's photo. His son was alive, but in danger. Now he knew he had to be extremely cautious. He tried replying to the message, "I want to speak to my son, prove he's okay." Almost immediately, a response came. "Keep digging and the next photo won't be so pleasant." The explicit threat made Ethan's blood boil. Whoever this Damien was, he was willing to harm a 5-year-old boy to get what he wanted. The thought was unbearable. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice small. Ethan put his phone away, a new resolve growing within him. "We keep looking, but more discreetly. Whoever this is, they're watching every move. I need to outsmart them." He looked at the photos on the wall, the smiling faces of people who had been part of his professional journey. How many of those smiles hid resentments? How many kept secrets that might lead him to whoever took Jacob? "We'll let them think I've given up," he said, more to himself than to Lily. "Meanwhile, we'll keep following leads." Somewhere in this puzzle lies the answer. He glanced again at the phone, at the threat still visible on the screen. Whoever Damien was, he was monitoring Ethan's every step, and he was getting nervous. The truth was closer than ever. Ethan could feel it. But one false step could cost Jacob his life. Rain fell mercilessly on the city when Ethan met Frank Doyle at the corner cafe. The private detective, a middle-aged man with a lined face and a keen gaze, looked out of place among the young baristas and customers on their laptops. "I've got something," Frank said bluntly, sliding a folder toward Ethan as soon as he sat down. "You were right about following the money. Over the past 2 weeks, after receiving the photo and the threat, Ethan had changed tactics. Instead of confronting suspects directly, he hired Frank to investigate behind the scenes while he pretended to have given up the search." "What did you find?" "A suspicious transaction. Lisa Jenkins, the nanny, received $50,000 in her account a week before Jacob disappeared. The money came from a shell company called Nemesis Holdings." Ethan frowned. Nemesis. "In Greek mythology, the goddess of vengeance," Frank explained, sipping his coffee. "Symbolic, don't you think? Were you able to trace this company?" Frank nodded. "It took time. They were careful, using multiple layers of front companies, but eventually it leads to a property." He turned a page in the folder, revealing photos of a secluded mansion surrounded by trees. "It's on the outskirts of the city, up in the mountains. Secluded, secured, a perfect place to hide someone." Ethan studied the pictures, a chill running down his spine. The house was impressive, with 3 floors, surrounded by a high wall, set back from the road, likely under surveillance. "Were you able to see inside?" "Didn't get that close. It's guarded, with cameras. But," Frank gave a small smile, "I got intel from a grocery delivery guy who services the place. He mentioned delivering chocolate chip cookies and colorful cereal. Kids' food." Ethan's heart pounded. Jacob loved chocolate chip cookies. "Who owns it?" "Officially, it's registered to one Eleanor Weiss, but I believe that's just another front. More interesting." Frank turned another page, showing a photo of a man in a suit leaving the property. "This guy visits regularly. Recognize him." Ethan examined the photo. The man had gray hair, was well dressed, but the image was too distant to make out his features. "I'm not sure. Could be anyone." "Well, I ran a facial recognition search. Guess what? It's Daniel Morgan." "Daniel Morgan?" Ethan tried to recall the name. Then he remembered the photo in his office that Lily had pointed out. The architect. "Worked on my first hotel." "Exactly, but his real name isn't Daniel Morgan. It's Damien Morris. He changed it legally after leaving your company." Ethan felt like he'd been punched. Damien. He finally had a face for the name. Why would he do that? Why use a false name to work with me? Frank shrugged. "That's for you to find out. But there's one more thing." He hesitated. "In the background check, I found that Damien Morris had a son who died in a car accident 7 years ago. The boy was 5, the same age as Jacob." Ethan's stomach turned. "What's the plan now?" Frank asked. "I'm going there." "That's crazy, Carter. The house is guarded. If this guy really kidnapped your son, it's dangerous." "I have no choice." "He's my son." Frank sighed, resigned. "I knew you'd say that. That's why I did a basic recon." He pulled out a small map. "There's a weak point at the back of the property. The wall is lower near a large tree, and security seems to be focused out front." Ethan studied the map, adrenaline surging through his veins. "When?" "Tonight would be ideal. There's a storm coming." "The rain and noise might cover you." Ethan nodded, gathering the documents. "Tonight, then." The rain had become a fierce storm by the time Ethan parked his rented car on a side road. about a mile from the property. He wore all black, carrying a backpack with basic tools, a flashlight, and a spare phone with GPS. Frank had offered to join him, but Ethan refused. If anything went wrong, he'd need someone outside who could call for help. The detective was now waiting in a car nearby, monitoring. The trek to the property was tough, through dense vegetation and mud. The heavy rain obscured his vision, but also helped mask his movements. When he finally spotted the mansion's walls, he paused to catch his breath and assess the situation. As Frank had said, security was concentrated at the main entrance. He circled around until he found the spot the detective had mentioned, a section of the wall partially concealed by a large tree, its branches hanging over the barrier. Ethan checked for visible cameras and began climbing. The branches were slippery from the rain, but desperation drove him forward. Reaching a thick branch that extended over the wall, he crawled carefully, then dropped silently to the other side. The backyard was spacious and well-maintained, with minimal lighting due to the storm. Ethan crouched among the shrubs, observing the house. A few lights were on, mostly on the first floor. On the second floor, only one window was lit. Moving swiftly and cautiously, he approached the house. A back door, likely leading to the kitchen, seemed the best option. Using the tools he'd brought, he worked the lock, grateful for the storm's noise covering any sound he made. After a tense few minutes, the door gave way. Ethan slipped inside, closing it behind him. He was in a large, modern kitchen, dark and empty at this late hour. He stopped to listen for any movement, but the house was quiet, except for the muffled sound of a TV somewhere far off. Moving like a shadow, Ethan explored the first floor. He found a luxurious living room, an office, a formal dining room, everything decorated with an expensive, impersonal taste, like a magazine spread. No sign of Jacob or evidence a child lived there. A wide staircase led to the second floor. Ethan ascended slowly, pausing on each step to ensure he made no noise. At the top, a long hallway stretched with several doors. The light he'd seen from outside came from the last door on the right. He approached carefully, checking the other doors as he passed. The first revealed a pristine guest room, apparently unused. The second was locked. The third was a luxurious bathroom. It was the fourth door that nearly stopped his heart. Here, finally, were signs of Jacob. The room was decorated with bright colors, shelves of toys, and a child's bed with superhero sheets, Jacob's favorites. On the walls hung colorful drawings, undoubtedly his son's art. Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes as he examined the pictures. One showed two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands with what seemed to be a hotel in the background. In a corner, in Jacob's messy handwriting, it said, "Me and Daddy," but the room was empty. The neatly made bed suggested Jacob wasn't there now. Where was he at this hour, sleeping in another room? Or maybe a noise from the hallway interrupted his thoughts. Ethan quickly hid behind the door, heart pounding. Light footsteps approached, a woman's, most likely. The door opened slightly, and someone entered. She was blonde, the same woman Jacob had described. She stepped in, looked around the empty room, and sighed. She picked up a teddy bear from the bed and set it down gently, almost maternally. Her back was to Ethan, unaware of his presence. He had to decide fast. Confront her or let her be. If he subdued her, he could force her to reveal Jacob's location, but it might alert others in the house. While he hesitated, she turned and screamed at the sight of him. Ethan moved quickly, covering her mouth with his hand. "Don't scream," he whispered urgently. "I don't want to hurt you. I just want my son back." Her eyes were wide with fear. She nodded slowly, and Ethan eased up a bit. "Where's Jacob?" he asked in a low voice. "He's not here," she replied, trembling. "Damien took him earlier." "Where to?" "The lake house." "He was afraid you were getting close." Ethan felt a mix of frustration and hope. "When are they coming back?" "Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. Damien doesn't tell me everything." "Who else is in the house right now?" "Just me and a guard downstairs watching TV." Ethan studied her face, trying to gauge if she was telling the truth. "What's your name?" "Claire." Claire, you need to understand, Jacob is my son. He's 5 years old. Whatever Damien told you about me, about why he's doing this, it's my child who's suffering. Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps. I know he's your son. I know this is wrong. She lowered her gaze. But I have no choice. Damien, he's not a man you can cross. Help me, Ethan pleaded. Tell me where the lake house is. Claire hesitated, clearly torn. He'll kill me if he finds out. I can protect you. I have resources, influence. I can keep you safe. She considered for a moment and finally sighed. The lake house is on the north shore of Willow Lake, about 20 miles from here. That's the only property out there, secluded, but she bit her lip. He's not alone. There's more security there. Thank you. Ethan loosened his grip. I'm leaving the way I came in. You don't have to tell anyone I was here. Claire nodded slowly. Just don't hurt Jacob. He's a good kid. I'd never hurt my son. Ethan gazed at her intently. Unlike your boss, who didn't mind traumatizing him. He was about to leave when heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, probably the guard, checking on something. Ethan looked at Claire, silently pleading. She seemed to make a decision. Quick, in the closet. Ethan hid while Claire opened the door, intercepting the guard. Everything okay, Claire? I thought I heard voices. Just me, talking on the phone, she replied with surprising calm. Checking in with Damien about the boy. Oh, everything all right? Yeah, he's sleeping soundly, according to Damien. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. I'm making some tea. Want some? Their voices faded down the corridor. Ethan waited a few more minutes before slipping out of the closet. He took one last look at Jacob's drawings, hope igniting in his chest again. His son was alive, and now he knew where to find him. Willow Lake glistened under the morning sun like a mirror when Ethan arrived in the area. He had driven through the night, determined not to lose more time. Frank had tried to convince him to wait, to plan better, but Ethan's patience had run out. From a high vantage point, using binoculars, he spotted the lake house. It was smaller than the mansion, but still impressive, a timber and stone construction by the water's edge, with a private pier and a moored boat. As Claire had said, it seemed to be the only property in the area. Ethan studied it for almost an hour, observing the routine. He saw 2 men who appeared to be guards patrolling the perimeter, switching places every half hour. He noticed a brief gap in their rotation, about 2 minutes when part of the back area was left unattended. He decided that was his best chance. He carefully made his way down to the lake shore, staying hidden among the trees. The land around the house was more open than at the mansion, making the approach riskier. He waited patiently for the guards to switch positions again. In that short interval, he ran in a crouch toward the back of the house and where a wooden deck jutted over the water. He slipped under the structure, heart pounding so hard he feared it was audible. From his hiding spot, he could hear voices inside. One was deep and authoritative, likely Damien. The other was small, childlike. Jacob. His son was alive and only a few feet away. Ethan had to fight the urge to barge in immediately. The hours passed slowly. Ethan remained in hiding, observing movements, planning his next step. He caught a glimpse of Jacob when the boy stepped onto the deck briefly with an older man, undoubtedly Damien. Ethan's heart clenched at the sight of his son. Jacob looked physically okay, but there was a sadness in his eyes that had never been there before. As the sun set, the opportunity finally arose. One of the guards took a phone call and walked away to answer it, while the other was at the front of the property. Damien and Jacob had gone inside after dinner. Ethan moved quickly, climbing onto the deck and testing the back door. It was unlocked, a careless oversight born of trust in their isolation. He slipped silently into a rustic yet luxurious living room. Voices came from a nearby room, probably the kitchen. Ethan crept forward, staying in the shadows. He could see Jacob seated at a table, eating ice cream, while Damien had his back turned, washing dishes. "Can I watch TV afterwards?" Jacob asked, his voice small but unmistakably his. "1 hour only," Damien replied without turning. "Then bedtime. When am I going to see my dad?" The question lingered for a moment. Damien turned off the faucet and dried his hands. "Jacob, We've talked about this. Your dad is busy right now. When he's finished with his important business, he'll come for you." "You always say that." Jacob's voice held a note of frustration. "It's been so many days." "I know, kid." "I know." Something odd tinged Damien's voice, almost remorse. Jacob finished his ice cream and got down from the chair. "I'm going to watch TV in the living room." "Okay, I'll be here if you need anything." The boy left the kitchen, heading toward Ethan, who quickly hid behind a couch. Once Jacob was in the living room and turned on the TV, Ethan waited for him to settle before making his move. Silently, he approached from behind the couch where Jacob sat, heart hammering in his chest. He reached out and lightly touched his son's shoulder. Jacob turned confused, and his eyes widened in recognition. Before he could cry out in surprise, Ethan gently placed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. Tears welled up in Jacob's eyes, and he threw himself into his father's arms. Ethan held him tightly, feeling the small body trembling. "I'm here," he whispered in Jacob's ear. "I've come to take you home. But we have to be very quiet, okay?" Jacob nodded against his shoulder, clinging to him as though afraid he might vanish. How touching! The cold voice made Ethan spin around sharply. Damien stood at the living room entrance, a gun pointed directly at them. He didn't look surprised, more resigned, as though he'd been expecting this. "Step away from the boy, Ethan." Reluctantly, Ethan released Jacob, keeping him partially shielded behind him. "It's over, Damien, or should I call you Daniel Morgan?" A humorless smile crossed the older man's face. "It's been a long time since anyone called me that name. I have to admit, I'm impressed. I didn't expect you to find me this quickly." "What do you want?" Ethan asked, trying to buy time, to gauge his options. "Money? Revenge? Which is it?" "Revenge is such a simplistic word." Damien gestured with the gun. "Sit down, both of you. We have a lot to discuss before my men return from their distraction." Ethan and Jacob sat on the couch, the boy still holding onto his father's hand. Damien took a seat in an armchair opposite them, the gun unwavering. "Do you know why I'm doing this, Ethan? You worked for me years ago as an architect, but I can't recall anything that justifies this." Damien gave a short, bitter laugh. "Of course you don't remember. Men like you rarely recall the lives you destroy on your way to the top." He paused, eyes distant for a moment. "I wasn't just an architect at your company. I was a minor partner. I invested all my savings into your first hotel, believing your grand promises." Memories resurfaced slowly. Daniel Morgan, the quiet architect who had contributed not just design work, but also initial capital. A discreet man who drank too much at company events. "I remember you," Ethan said slowly. "But you left on your own. You sold your shares." "On my own?" Damien's face twisted in anger. "You and your lawyers cornered me when you discovered my drinking problem. You used a hidden clause in the contract to devalue my shares. I needed the money for my son's treatment, so I sold for a fraction of what they were worth." Ethan furrowed his brow, trying to recall. It had been a turbulent time, when the company was just starting. He had vague memories of an issue with a problematic partner, but the details had been handled by his attorneys. "Your son was sick. Leukemia. He needed specialized, expensive treatment. The money I got from the shares wasn't enough. I had to mortgage my house, sell everything. And still..." Damien took a deep breath, pain evident in his eyes. "He didn't survive. My son died because I couldn't give him the treatment he deserved, while you built your empire and I buried my 5-year-old. Jacob squeezed Ethan's hand, frightened by the rage in the man's voice. "I'm sorry about your son," Ethan said genuinely. "But that was years ago. Why now?" "Why, Jacob?" "Because you never paid for what you did." Damien's voice rose. "You went on thriving, building more hotels, amassing more wealth, while I lost everything. My son, my wife who left me, my career that collapsed due to drinking." He pointed at Jacob. "I wanted you to feel what I felt. That sensation of having what you love most ripped away without warning. The emptiness, the despair. So you set all this up, the fake death, the body in the morgue?" Damien nodded. "A meticulous plan. It wasn't hard to find another child who had recently passed away and resembled Jacob. Bribes in the right places open many doors. He smiled coldly. I have to admit, you surprised me. I didn't think you'd uncover the truth so fast. That little street girl wasn't part of my plan. What did you plan to do with Jacob? Initially, keep him for a few weeks. Let him witness your total destruction, then return him. Let him see the father he idolized reduced to a broken man, drunk and ruined like I was. Damien leaned forward. But that was before I realized I could get something more valuable. What? Your company. Control of everything you've built. Ethan felt a chill. How? You're not alone in this room, Ethan. Damien smiled enigmatically. As if on cue, a side door opened and a familiar figure walked in, Thomas Carter, Ethan's younger brother. Thomas. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. You're involved in this? Thomas, always the better dressed and more meticulous sibling, adjusted his shirt cuffs. Hello, brother. Surprised? How? Why? Would you believe me if I said it was out of brotherly love? Thomas laughed coldly. I've lived in your shadow my whole life, Ethan. The brilliant older brother who built an empire from scratch, while I was just a competent administrator, occupying a position you gave me out of pity. It was never out of pity, Ethan protested. I trust you. We're family. Family. Thomas shook his head. Easy to talk about family when you have everything. The company name, majority control, the board's respect. Do you know how many times I heard, your brother would do it differently? Or we should consult Ethan first? Jacob glanced from one adult to the other, confused and frightened. Ethan squeezed his hand, trying to reassure him. So you two planned this together, Ethan said, the pieces finally falling into place. Use my son to break me emotionally, so I'd relinquish control of the company. Brilliant, isn't it? Thomas smirked. I ran into Damien by chance at a bar. He was drinking and brooding over the past, talking about how you ruined his life. I immediately saw the potential. He had the emotional motivation. I had the inside knowledge of the company and your life. He shrugged elegantly. A perfect partnership. The plan was simple, Damien continued. Make you believe your son was dead. Watch you emotionally disintegrate, becoming incapable of running the company. At that moment, Thomas would step in, assume temporary control for the good of the business, and once the transfer was complete, Jacob would miraculously reappear, Thomas finished. A heartwarming story for the press. The boy who was mistakenly declared dead, reunited with his emotionally devastated father. No one would question the change in company leadership, not in the midst of such family drama. Ethan felt sick, realizing the extent of the betrayal. His own brother, conspiring to use his child as a pawn in a corporate power game. Thomas, how could you? He's your nephew. Thomas at least had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. Jacob was never in real danger. We made sure he was taken care of. You took him from me, made me believe he was dead. Do you have any idea how traumatic that is? That's exactly the point, Damien interjected, voice filled with bitterness. Now you know how it feels, Ethan. The pain of losing a child, and the difference is you'll get yours back. I never had that chance. Ethan looked at Jacob, who gazed back with terrified eyes. Then he turned to Damien. What do you want now? You realize your plan didn't fully work. I found you. True, we'll have to improvise. Damien leveled the gun more firmly. We can still make a deal. What kind of deal? Simple. You sign documents transferring majority control of the company to Thomas, and I let you and Jacob leave unharmed. And if I refuse? Damien's cold smile returned. Then things get complicated, and maybe Jacob has to stay with us longer. The veiled threat made Ethan's blood boil. Don't threaten my son. It's not a threat, it's a statement. You choose the easy way or the hard way. Either way, Thomas takes control of the company. The only question is how much suffering your son will endure in the process. Ethan looked at Jacob, at the fearful eyes that trusted him completely. What was a company compared to his son's safety? If I sign it, you guarantee you'll let Jacob go. This ends here. You have my word, Damien said. The word of a man who kidnapped a child isn't worth much, Ethan replied bitterly. Consider something else, brother, Thomas added, his voice smooth and menacing. If you insist on pursuing the truth, fighting us in court, I'll expose your secret." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "What secret?" Thomas smiled without warmth. "How you really got the initial funding for your first hotel, how you diverted funds from our parents' account, how you forged signatures." That's not true," Ethan protested weakly. "Isn't it?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "I have the original documents, Ethan, the ones you thought you destroyed. Imagine how the board and shareholders would react if they found out your empire was built on fraud." Ethan felt the weight of his past crashing down. He had been young, desperate, convinced that the end justified the means, a mistake he never dreamed would come back to haunt him. "I did it to help us, to help the family." "No, you did it to help yourself, to achieve your ambition." Thomas stepped closer, his voice dropping. Chapter 12. The Reunion and a Choice. Translator's note. The user's original text includes a new heading, Capítulo 12 here. We maintain it as part of the story structure and numbering. The story continues seamlessly in the same paragraph structure. The dawn light streamed through the hospital windows, bathing the room in a golden glow. Ethan hadn't let go of Jacob's hand since the rescue team found them at the lake house. The hastily coordinated operation, following Ethan's desperate call to Frank, resulted in a tense confrontation, but thankfully no serious injuries. Jacob slept now. His small body finally relaxed after the adrenaline and stress of the last few hours. The doctors assured Ethan that his son was physically fine, no signs of mistreatment or neglect, but recommended observation to assess any psychological impact. Ethan watched Jacob's face, marveling at every detail he'd feared he'd never see again. The freckles on his nose, so much like his mother's, the long eyelashes that cast soft shadows on his cheeks, the tiny lightning bolt scar behind his ear from when he was 3. His son, his treasure, was back. A gentle knock on the door broke his reverie. Kevin entered, looking as exhausted as Ethan felt after all the hours of tension. "How is he?" the lawyer asked, stepping closer to the bed. "Sleeping peacefully," Ethan replied, voice low so as not to wake Jacob. "The doctors say he's going to be okay." Kevin nodded, relieved. "I have news. The police arrested Thomas and Damien. They didn't resist. Damien's confessing everything, probably trying to reduce his sentence. He's implicating Thomas in every detail." Ethan felt a pang of pain at the thought of his brother. The betrayal was still a raw wound, hard to process. "The board is in an emergency session," Kevin continued. "As soon as they found out what Thomas did, they voted unanimously to remove him. They're waiting for your instructions on the next steps." "The company can wait." Ethan gently squeezed Jacob's hand. "Right now, I can only think about him." The conversation was interrupted by movement from the bed. Jacob's eyes fluttered open, blinking against the light. "Dad?" His voice was small, still sleepy. "I'm here, champ." Ethan leaned in, kissing his son's forehead. "Right here." Jacob looked around, recognizing the hospital setting. A flash of fear crossed his face. "They're not going to take me again, are they?" "Never again." Ethan's voice was firm with conviction. "The bad men have been arrested. They're far away and can't hurt you anymore." Jacob seemed to process the information for a moment. Uncle Thomas, too. He was one of the bad men. The innocent question struck Ethan like a blow. Even at 5, Jacob understood the betrayal. Yes, unfortunately, he did something very wrong. But he's being punished for it now. The boy nodded, accepting the explanation with the simplicity of a child. "Can I have ice cream for breakfast?" Ethan laughed, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. Children's ability to move forward, to find normalcy even after trauma, was astounding. "I think today we can make an exception." Kevin left quietly, giving father and son privacy. While Jacob devoured his chocolate ice cream, courtesy of a smiling nurse, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the chain of events that brought them here. If not for that little girl in the hospital alley, he might never have found the truth, Lily. The only person who had believed him from the start, who stood by him when everyone else doubted his sanity. The homeless girl, with no family or home, who risked her safety to help a stranger. "What is it, Dad?" Jacob asked, noting his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about someone very special. The person who helped me find you." "Who?" "A girl named Lily." She saw who took you and told me. Without her, I might have believed. Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of accepting Jacob's death was unbearable. Can I meet her? I want to say thank you. Ethan smiled, feeling a certainty grow within him. Yes, we'll find her as soon as we leave here. 3 days later, Ethan and Jacob were discharged. The press, of course, had gotten wind of the story. It was impossible to keep secret the attempted kidnapping of a prominent businessman's son, but Kevin had managed the situation skillfully, limiting access and protecting the family's privacy. Ethan declined all interviews, issuing only a brief statement thanking the authorities and asking for respect during his son's recovery. What the media didn't know and didn't need to know was that his first stop after the hospital wasn't his mansion, but the Pine Street shelter. The place was modest, an old Victorian house converted into a temporary refuge for homeless children. The director, a woman with grey hair and kind eyes, listened intently as Ethan explained his search for Lily. She hasn't come around much lately, the director said, worry on her face. Lily's always been too independent for her own good. She shows up for a warm meal when it's really cold, but rarely stays the night. Do you know where she might be? Not really. She used to hang around the main square or the public library, sometimes the park when the weather's nice. Ethan thanked her and, hand in hand with Jacob, began their search. They visited the square, the library, several parks. They asked street vendors, other homeless individuals, guards. Some recognized Lily's description: dark, messy hair, big observant eyes, but no one knew her current whereabouts. By the end of the day, Ethan was starting to fear they wouldn't find her. Jacob, despite his fatigue, insisted they keep looking. She helped you find me, the boy said with simple logic. Now we have to find her. It was when they passed the club where everything began that Ethan had an idea. Let's check one more thing, he told Jacob, heading to the back of the building. And there she was, sitting on a bench near the service entrance, talking to an older security guard. Joe, Ethan assumed. When Lily spotted them, her eyes widened in recognition and surprise. You did it, she exclaimed, standing up. You found your son. Ethan smiled, emotion catching in his throat. Yes, and it's largely thanks to you. Jacob let go of his father's hand and ran to Lily, stopping a few steps away, suddenly shy. Hi, I'm Jacob. My dad said you helped him find me. Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the thanks. I just told him what I saw. It was much more than that, Ethan interjected. You believed me when no one else did. You stayed by my side throughout the search. Without you, I might have given up. Guard Joe, who had been observing curiously, discreetly stepped away to give them privacy. I came to invite you, Lily, Ethan continued. I want you to come live with us. The girl stared at him, incredulous. What? Jacob and I have a house that's far too big for just the two of us. You helped us when we needed it most. Let us repay you. Lily took a step back, distrust plain in her eyes. 5 years on the streets had taught her that if something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Why? She asked, narrowing her eyes. You don't have to do that just because I helped you. It's not just gratitude, Ethan replied sincerely. It's because we see something special in you. Intelligence, courage, heart. You deserve a chance, Lily, a family, a home, an education, a different future. Jacob approached Lily, timidly extending his hand. Please. It'd be cool to have someone else to play with at home. The girl looked at his outstretched hand, then at Ethan, uncertainty warring with hope in her eyes. I don't know. I'm not easy. Other families always sent me back. We're not like other families, Ethan said gently. And to be honest, neither Jacob nor I are very easy either. That earned a small smile from Lily. Can I try for a few days just to see how it is? Of course, for as long as you want. No pressure. She hesitated another moment before finally nodding. Okay, but just a few days. Jacob did a little happy jump, while Ethan felt a surge of relief. It was just the beginning, he knew that. Gaining Lily's trust would be a long process, but it was a start. The following weeks were a period of adjustment for everyone. At first, Lily kept her guard up, refusing to unpack the small backpack with her few belongings, as though expecting to be kicked out at any moment. She stayed alert to every sound, watching every move. Polite but distant. Jacob, on the other hand, instantly adopted her like an older sister. Despite them being the same age, he followed her around the house, showed her his toys, told her stories. His unconditional acceptance was the first ray of sunshine to break through Lily's walls of distrust. The first real change happened 3 weeks in. Ethan was helping Jacob build a model airplane when he heard laughter coming from Lily's room, the room she now accepted as her own. He approached quietly and peeked through the slightly open door. Lily and Jacob were sitting on the floor, surrounded by crayons and paper, drawing something together and laughing at some private joke. What caught Ethan's attention, however, was Lily's backpack, finally unpacked, her belongings neatly placed in the drawers. That night, after the kids were asleep, Ethan found a drawing left on his desk. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall man, a boy, and a girl, all holding hands. In the corner, in Lily's childish handwriting, it said, "Thank you." Tears blurred his vision as he carefully placed the drawing in a drawer. Something important had begun to heal in all of them. 6 months passed. Thomas and Damien's trial was swift, thanks to confessions and the abundance of evidence. Thomas received 12 years for conspiracy to kidnap, attempted extortion, and fraud. Damien Childe, for his direct role in the plot and eventual cooperation, was sentenced to 8 years. The company stabilized after the initial scandal. Ethan implemented major administrative changes, including distributing a portion of his shares to long-time employees, creating a stronger sense of collective ownership and purpose. But his greatest transformation was personal. His work hours decreased drastically. His priorities shifted. Now he rarely missed one of Jacob's soccer games or a school presentation for Lily, who'd adapted remarkably well to the private school Ethan enrolled her in. That Saturday morning, the 3 of them strolled through the park, enjoying the spring sunshine. Jacob and Lily ran ahead, chasing a frisbee, while Ethan watched them with a contented smile. "Dad! Look how good I'm getting," Lily shouted, throwing the frisbee in a perfect arc that Jacob caught with a skillful leap. The word "dad" was still new on her lips, used sparingly, like a precious treasure she feared wasting. Each time Ethan heard it, warmth filled his chest in a way no business success ever had. The process of adopting Lily was nearly complete. It had been surprisingly simple, given his influence and the fact that no one had claimed her for 5 years. In a few weeks, it would be official: Lily Carter, his daughter in the eyes of the law, as she already was in his heart. "They look happy," came a voice behind him. Ethan turned, surprised to see Christine, his ex-wife, standing beside him. He hadn't seen her since the hospital, when she visited Jacob shortly after the rescue. "Christine, I didn't know you were in town. I arrived yesterday." She watched the children play, a soft smile on her face. "Jacob's grown so much, and that must be Lily, the girl who helped you." "Yes, she's living with us now. And in fact, I'm finalizing her adoption." Christine raised her eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "Wow, that's unexpected. The Ethan I knew barely had time for one child, let alone 2. There was no bitterness in her tone, just a statement of fact. "The Ethan you knew learned some hard lessons," he said quietly. "Almost losing Jacob, finding out Thomas's betrayal, it all made me rethink what really matters." Christine nodded, understanding. "I'm glad for you, for all of you." She hesitated. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you, that I thought you were delusional when you insisted Jacob was alive." "That's what everyone thought. All the evidence pointed that way. Even so, I should have had more faith. I should have—" She didn't finish, but Ethan understood. There were many should-haves in their shared past. "The kids would love it if you stayed for lunch," he offered. "If you want to, of course." Christine smiled. "I'd like that." That night, after the children were asleep and Christine had returned to her hotel, Ethan sat on his home's veranda, gazing at the stars. The path that led him here had been winding, marked by losses and discoveries, betrayals and unexpected loyalties. He thought of Damien, a man consumed by grief and bitterness, unable to move on after losing his son; of Thomas, whose jealousy and ambition had corrupted the bond of brotherhood that should have been sacred. Both had allowed darkness in their hearts to consume them, turning pain into cruelty. For a moment, Ethan recognized how easily he could have gone down the same path. If Jacob had truly died, would he have been able to overcome it? Or would he have spiraled into the same despair and vengeance that consumed Damien? Light footsteps brought him back to the present. Lily stood at the veranda door, barefoot, wearing pink pajamas, a color she initially rejected as too girly, but now ranked among her favorites. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan asked. She shook her head, coming over to sit beside him on the rocking chair. "I had a bad dream." "Want to talk about it?" Lily hesitated. "I dreamed this all ended, that I went back to the streets." Ethan draped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "That's never going to happen, Lily. This is your home now. Forever. Promise?" "I promise." They sat quietly for a while, the chair swaying gently, both gazing at the night sky. "The social worker said I could use your last name once the adoption is final," Lily said, her voice small but hopeful. "I'd be Lily Carter, if you want to. You don't have to change your name if you'd prefer to keep the original." "I don't want anything from the past," she said with surprising conviction. "I want to be new, different, like you and Jacob." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "It's an honor to have you as part of this family, Lily. You saved us, you know. Not just by helping find Jacob, but by reminding us what really matters." She yawned, snuggling closer. "You saved me too," she mumbled, eyes drifting shut. While the girl slept in his arms, Ethan reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. Just a few months ago, his life revolved solely around contracts, expansions, and profits. Jacob was important, of course, but there was always a more urgent meeting, a more crucial negotiation. The idea of adding another child to his life, especially one with Lily's difficult background, would have seemed impossible. But almost losing Jacob had fundamentally changed him. His priorities were reordered, his values rediscovered. And in the process, not only had Lily found a family, he had found a better version of himself. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Ethan stood and carried Lily back to her room. After tucking her in and kissing her forehead, he stopped by Jacob's room. Watching him sleep peacefully, his heart overflowed with gratitude. The final breath of truth had not been one of despair, as he'd feared, but one of liberation, a truth that freed him from the chains of unbridled ambition and fear of loss, showing him what really mattered had been there all along, the people he loved and who loved him back. In his office, before retiring for the night, he glanced again at the drawing Lily had made. The 3 stick figures holding hands, so simple, yet so profound. The child who'd seen the truth when everyone else doubted had now taught him the most important truth. Real success isn't in material achievements, but in the human connections we make, the hearts we touch, the love we share. "I'll see you tomorrow," he whispered to the drawing. A promise not just to Lily and Jacob, but to himself. A promise to keep choosing what truly matters, every day, for all the tomorrows to come. And Ethan Carter, once defined by his hotels and his fortune, now defined himself by something far more precious. The little boy who called him Dad, and the girl who, against all odds, had also become his daughter. Every tower of his hotels could reach the clouds, but they'd never stand as tall as what he had truly built, a family where wounds could heal and new beginnings were possible.